Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing the much-needed minority opinion in popular internet discourse. I'm Tilly, my pronouns are she and her, and I lead the film discussions.
I'm Josh, my pronouns are he and him, and I lead the music discussions.
You're joining us today at the beginning of our three-part review, one episode for each film of Robert Rodriguez's Mexico trilogy. There's actually no one name for this entire
Yeah.
thing. It's either
Honest,
called the Mariachi Trilogy or the
yeah.
Mexico Trilogy.
I honestly feel like Mariachi Trilogy makes more sense because
I
that
think
is
it
the
definitely
guy
does.
that the films are about.
It's
It's like
yeah.
calling the Bourne films the United States of America trilogy. It's like,
I,
okay.
to be fair though, that is a very although it's not set in the US, I guess, but that is a very United States of America trilogy right there.
Maybe.
That is an extreme, extremely US trilogy. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the first film in the trilogy, Robert Rodriguez. Jesus Christ. There's too many R's in his I'm editing this out, but there's too many R's in this man's name. Robert Rodriguez's, $13,000, I believe that's adjusted for inflation budget, El Mariachi, which is
Yeah.
famous as it's one of the iconic low budget films that project a director into, like, I was gonna say notoriety, into prominence. Like, to be honest, I think you could call Robert Rodriguez a notorious director. Uh, but before we get into El Mariachi, we're gonna talk a little bit about Breaking Bad. Now, this isn't a full review because we're gonna talk about this for like 10 minutes. So, like, you know, this isn't the podcast take on Breaking Bad. So yeah, Josh, what did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I thought it would be fun preamble. It mildly fits the tone of like dealing with, the Mexican cartel, right? That El
Yeah,
Mariachi deals with. And I've been rewatching it. I think I just last night watched the Crawl Space episode. Um, which is like still one of my favorite endings to like any episode ever. I know I know everything that is good in Breaking Bad has since become a meme. But yeah,
yeah.
no, Walt becoming the Joker was very good.
It is a
So
show
good.
that has survived becoming a meme extremely well. Like, because I was honestly worried the last time I rewatched it about a year ago that I would only see the memes, because Breaking Bad memes are also exceptionally like good. I think they're profoundly good, and I'm so happy they've stayed for so long. Uh,
I
but yeah,
think
it
what
survived
the fuck are
very
you
well.
talking about? Jesse meme is extremely
Yeah, specifically that scene as well. The crawl space scene is so funny. Um,
But
but
yeah,
it's a great scene. Like, it's one of my favorite scenes, I think, like, ever.
yeah, it is profoundly good.
Breaking Bad for me is potentially like top 10 pieces of like visual media, which
Hmm.
is one of the which is, you know, like, it's one of those opinions that's an opinion, and it's simultaneously a hot take and a cold take because we're so many layers of irony deep, as a society. But Josh had a specific angle, I believe.
Yeah. So I've been struggling with the show because I think there was a recent kind of like, post that was memed a lot, with the screenshot of Gus Fring saying a man provides for his family, and the caption is like Breaking Bad was the last like soy-free television show. Um And I think like the response to that post was like, no, silly, Breaking Bad is the deconstruction of toxic masculinity and the anti-hero.
Mm.
And rewatching the show, what I've been struggling with is I find it as an action show, like comparing it to stuff like, I don't know, like a 24 or like other I can't think of a lot of action shows off the top of my head, but shows where the point is action happens and it's
Ooh,
good.
I would say like
Um
The Walking Dead is an
yeah, I
action
guess
show
Walking Dead, yeah.
masquerading as being about characters, when actually it's about the action because the characters are so thin that they might as well not be there. So yeah, Walking Dead is a big one.
Yeah, it is like S tier as like an action show, like just as a setup for like characters to
Villain.
do cool shit. at each
Yeah.
other is extremely, extremely good. Like I can't overstate how satisfying it is from that angle. Um, but like thematically, as like a commentary or a deconstruction on like masculinity or crime or the American police system, it is, I think it's pretty bereft and actually reinforces some like harmful ideas. Like
Hmm.
I really think it's disingenuous to frame the show as a rejection of toxic masculinity, particularly because um I think the show frames Walter White's toxic tendencies as like an existential heroism. Like it's not simply that Walter White is abusive, manipulative, horrendously violent, and like
Yeah.
egotistical. It's there are multiple speeches in the show that justify his actions by him saying to other characters, "This is about me getting to have a choice. I spent all my life not choosing, and this cancer diagnosis has just become another thing that people are deciding for me, and this is
Mm.
about me making a choice." And you have this scene where like the you know it's like season 4 and he's going back for more cancer checkups, and there's this young guy who's like feeling like his life is over because he got this diagnosis, and Walt like gets really frustrated. He's like, "Look, dude, I'm still making choices. My life is mine until it's like officially gone."
Mm.
And I do think the show wants you to get like really into like this notion that he is like this existential hero making choices. But then you also have like everything he does is for pure ego, which the show is really overt about, right? So
Yeah.
again, there's this weird thing where I do think the show wants me to love Walter and think he's epic and cool and like this existential hero, but also is trying to say, but also maybe he's a bad guy. And I just don't think you can have it both ways.
I I think where I disagree is just how much it's about Walter. I think one really massive thing with Walter is that he's a stand-in for wider men, which I know is just obviously how media works. But what I mean by that is, I think a lot of the show is criticizing a society where like it's a very like contrapoints is men argument from my perspective of like Walter has lived his entire life very like uh absent of any agency. He doesn't feel like he's had an interesting existence. And I don't think the show is criticizing Walter for that. I think it's about the wider world, really. I think that's where criticism of the American healthcare system is so relevant because it is so like robbing of his agency. It's so um like it forces him into this and almost like tricks him into thinking it's his own choice. uh and so really like where where a man's treatment should just be such an accepted given thing, he actually is like forced into this incredibly um independent and like self making path. And I think the show is using like that idea that the way that like Western society is constructed, but specifically in America because of the American healthcare system, like the only way that this man has ever had any kind of agency is like in getting cancer treatment. Because like in season 1 there's a reasonable justification that he's doing this because of the treatment, and it's only like later on that it becomes a sort of addiction for him. And so yeah, it's really about like the horror of that, basically like a society that pushes someone to that extreme. And like it's not just about the money, it's about the like existential rift that results in something like that becoming an escape. So that's one thing I would say that I really like about the show. But I also do think the show does a bit of a thing of like, isn't it epic when Walter win kind of thing, which is inherently tied to like there because the whole thing is his drug dealing and drug manufacturing is his like inflated swollen masculinity, and therefore when it's epic when he wins in that, it's kind of dissonant. I do get what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree that there is like some critique of the American healthcare system in the show, and it is saying that like, you know, the conditions, the social conditions Walt's been put in are the reason why he turns to this life and feels like he has no agency. But there's a great video by FD Signifier called Edgelord Movies and the Men Who Love Them, asking the question, why do white men love Edgelord movies?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
do
Fight
think
Club
this
and
follows the same structure as like a falling down, like someone who's been trampled on by like a society that
yeah.
is failing people at large, and then responding to that by like being extremely toxic and violent and awful, and that being their way of like responding to this. And like falling down, I don't think it truly reckons of how much of a failure that response is, because it conflates Walt's violence with a certain heroism. Like
Yeah,
it,
that's
like
very
it.
true.
The creator often describes the arc as like wanting to show this ordinary school teacher becoming Scarface, and Scarface ends with him coked up out of his mind, alone and like suicidal.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas this
yeah.
ends of this amazing heroic like final gauntlet to get the money back to his family and to sacrifice his life for Jesse. Like it wants to conflate the violence of heroism, and I think that's where like thematically it just ends up not saying much of anything.
Mm.
Um, and it and I really think it's disingenuous to say that the lived experience of the show is wanting him to not be this guy, because it's like watching the Hulk and wanting the Hulk to stop being the Hulk. I'd never watch a Hulk film and think, yeah, I want him, Bruce Banner, to like get therapy and like stop becoming the Hulk. I want him to be the Hulk. And like I don't know how
Mm.
anyone who loves the show can watch the first 3 seasons and not just like live for those moments where he beats Tuco with the bomb meth, or the stay out of my territory, or I am the one who knocks. Like there's nothing else in the show. These characters don't have friends. All they do is like plotty
Uh,
kind of violent stuff other than Jesse. Like it's very about the action. And if you're watching it and every time an action scene happens you think, oh god, this is bad, Walt needs to stop. I just don't know, like the show is directed to make that stuff exhilarating and fun and like cool. So
I,
I don't it works better for me when I watch it as like, oh yeah, this is like if I did the evil run in a Fallout game and I'm gonna like say the most menacing, horrible shit. I'm gonna say my name, everyone, and it's gonna be really cool. But I can't imagine watching this like genuinely being like, oh, so disgusted by the violence and I
yeah,
want
yeah,
Walt to
yeah.
stop being abusive. Um,
I
that's what makes
think
the show fun.
I think I'm with you so far as there's nothing else. Like I do think there is enough with other people and the people in his life just being like, what the fuck are you doing? And I think there's something to be said between the way the show implicates you in enjoying Walt's like feats, and then in season
Mm,
5 when Marie, like, because I, like, as soon as you brought up like there being quote unquote nothing else, my mind immediately goes to the image of Marie in season 5, like just looking at Walt with this feeling of utter like disgust, like. And because there's almost, as I was watching the show the last time I did, obviously I know, in my brain what happens, but I almost expected this like Spider-Man-esque scene where like, they discover more like, I guess more like a Batman, where like, they discover what he does, and it's actually quite like dark, but there's this sort of like respect for just how, fucking cool he is and like what he's done and what he's achieved. um but then the horror of contrasting that expectation, which I think Walt does have, between like that just visceral disgust that everyone in his life has for him, implicates you, like I said, by enjoying that kind of thing. So I don't think it's totally hopeless from that perspective. Like I don't think it's as much of a failure as something like Falling Down, which I think is a complete fucking failure at what it's trying to do. Like I think there's just one emotional scene at the end where what's his name? Like the bad guy gets a bit emotional, and then he dies and it's over. But I am with you up until that point, basically.
I do see what you mean, but comparing it, but then it just feels condescending because it feels like you gave me 4 seasons where the hook for the last 2 seasons before we get to season 5 is Gus versus Walter. That's like how the show is marketed. Those are like the most exciting scenes. And the final moment of season 4, I won. It's like, fuck yeah, this is so cool, good.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
do you
No, no,
like,
no.
and then you turn around with that Marie scene and point me in the audience, say, see, you're an unthoughtful bad guy for enjoying what the shit Walter has done. Look how much of a monster he is. And it's like, okay, but you were, I mean, it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just
yeah.
was unfair.
No, 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 no. That's what. Yeah, that's why I say I'm with. I do think the other characters get a fair say. Like if it wasn't for all the other people in his life, then it would be a lot. Then it would be a falling down for me. Um, but I mean, I think Breaking Bad is also just viscerally a lot better made than Falling Down. I really don't like that film. Um, uh, but yeah, I am with you with like we kind of talked about ludonarrative dissonance, kind of with romantique, and I think there is a little bit of that with this show. Um,
Fair enough. I still really enjoy the show. I'm just saying that, like, thematically, I don't know what to take away from it. Like, yes, I know toxic masculinity is bad, but also
mm,
clearly the show is saying something about taking control of your life, and there is an existential kind of like individual man living for himself. You know,
mm-hmm.
creating a son in Jesse,
Yeah,
creating an empire to feel powerful in, and he
mm-hmm.
is powerful. Like, he is cool. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah,
irony
yeah,
there.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I just don't know like what to take from it. And it's also like super into cops. Like, it's very into cops.
yeah. No, it does. It
Hank is epic and good all the
Hank is
time.
so cool. He's such a good guy, even when he abuses his. Well. Anyway, this could very easily become a Breaking Bad episode,
Yeah,
and we're never gonna come to a comfortable resting point. We're talking about Breaking Bad, so I'm gonna have to just shut the brakes on, and move us on nicely to El Mariachi. Uh, so this isn't a film that needs a great deal of introduction. It's basically a case of mistaken identity. It's a classic case of mistaken identity. A man dressed in black with a suitcase escapes from his prison with a suitcase. Sorry, a man dressed in black with a guitar case full of guns escapes from his prison cell, and goes out for revenge on the sort of old accomplice that put him there. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives in town, and he is also dressed in black, carrying a guitar case because he is the titular character El Mariachi. Um, and yeah, the plot follows from there. Uh, I'm gonna start with Josh today. Josh, what did you think of El Mariachi as a beginning of our, as well as just like so? Yeah, obviously giving your thoughts on the film as well, but how are you kind of reckoning with this film as the start of a like podcast trilogy review?
yeah. So I was very much I came into this with the expectation that this will kind of set the stage or frame the trajectory that Robert Rodriguez's career will go in from here.
Mm.
I've been trying to do some podcast homework and watch some Rodriguez films on the side because I realized I'd
You've
only
been
seen the Spy Kids and Lava Girl film before this. I'd never
you've been
seen
succeeding.
any
You've
other Robert
done a lot
Rodriguez
of
film.
homework.
And so this was a very exciting start. I think for context, I think something that I think is really important of looking at Rodriguez as director is the fact that he basically came up with Tarantino. Like, this Elmer actually comes out in the same year as Reservoir Dogs,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is nuts. And obviously they're like literal friends and like
yeah.
really love and adore and respect each other. I was looking for like Rodriguez interviews, and the first one I found was him interviewing Tarantino on his like TV show network. And
Hmm.
he looked at him with eyes, that everyone wants to
Yeah,
be looked at with.
there's
He
such
adores this man.
admiration. Yeah.
Yeah, and watching From Dusk Till Dawn, I mean, that felt like the product of two dudes drinking, probably doing some coke, and just like, hey, what if we made this crazy film that starts off as like a Tarantino crime film and ends as a Rodriguez vampire film? It feels like a
Yeah, yeah,
bet,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah. So coming back to this, I'm kind of thinking of this as like the not anti the yeah the a sister film to Reservoir in some weird way. I don't know why, but that is just because of how closely tied they are in the game as well.
Yeah, as an industry thing, they're a real pairing.
Man, I think this film was kind of rough. It's a weird film. I almost would prefer a documentary about how the hell they made this film because it's like a miracle film. It's incredible that it even exists,
Yeah,
considering how little money they had. And if you look at the kind of fucking like incorporating bloopers into the plot because they didn't have enough money to like do more film.
to do more takes. Yeah,
Yeah, stuff like that, which is just incredible. Versus the actual product, which I think is it almost feels unfair to compare this to like a Reservoir Dogs. I know Tarantino is like 5 years older than Rodriguez at
mm,
this point,
mm.
but like man, this really feels like a student film to me. Like it's hard to really view this as
Yeah.
a film.
I I'm gonna cut in very briefly with my opinion, and I'm gonna make it about bad horror films again, like I do every episode. Uh, I so low budget stuff is, for me now, I have an extremely low bar of quality to get through, and that's not to take away from my actual enjoyment of this film, because I enjoyed this film overall. I would say I obviously will have my gripes. Like this is this is never going to be like a perfect film, and no one who like loves it is trying to make it out to be. Uh, but I think this film does so much, not with its money, but just by actually being just competent, and more than competent, I would say, because I would say for $13,000, I would say it's competent by those standards. But it's more than that. I think it has some level of heart, and I'm not saying it's like a grand satisfying story that I'll like remember, but while I was watching it, I didn't feel like I was just watching a cardboard cutout. I don't know. I think I really liked the mariachi. I really liked him. I really liked watching him run away from situations, especially like that first, like the hotel one, like, which is silly, but I think viscerally that scene really works. And I don't know, I think there's something to this film that's more than just like succeeding at being made. I'm not trying to say that like I love it, and like I'm gonna remember this story, and like I think it's a like grand piece of art. But it was it my main worry with this film was just like it just kind of getting by, but it didn't just do that for me. I found it very charming,
Mm.
basically.
I guess I agree with what you say about the titular mariachi character. The actor who I believe will be like brutally replaced in the
Yeah,
next couple of films, right?
it's so savage. I
By
actually,
by Antonio Banderas, right?
which if it wasn't, yeah, if it wasn't Antonio Banderas, I'd be really like, I'd genuinely be sad. I would really like to see like this mariachi doing like be in like bigger films and like stuff where they have money. But I also, we're big Antonio Banderas film fans on this podcast, so like it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I think he's really charming, and I I think there are a lot of very bad performances in this film. A lot
Yes.
of people who feel like barely actors. Like these are the kind of non-actor friends you get because you can't afford to pay actors.
In that way, yeah, it is uncannily student film,
Yeah,
uncannily. But I, ah,
but I think it's the genre. I think it's the genre because, for example, like um uh a film like Funny Ha Ha
mm,
um is the exact same way. Like almost everyone in that film is a non-actor. Uh, but that is leading into like, I mean, that was creating the genre of like mumblecore, right? Like this
yeah,
extremely naturalistic, slice of life, which kind of works at a low budget. So trying to
yeah,
do like this kind of crime epic hero origin story, Um, I think I think it is a much more challenging hurdle to overcome. But yeah, I think the main guy like grounds us in some like inherent likability. He really reminded me of Matthew Broderick, kind of Ferris Bueller era. Like he had that kind of
Yeah,
he's a really nice
youthful
guy, but there's also like
charm.
a snarkiness and a cheekiness to a youthfulness, like you say. So I got that vibe. So yeah, I agree. I'm on board. I like our main guy here.
Good, good. I'm glad. I think the what you so I'm really glad you brought up genre, because what that meant was that this felt really like pulpy and silly, but in an incredibly fun way, where it
Yeah,
constantly felt like it was riding a line of irony, and
yeah.
it never tipped either way. Like it never felt like I was just watching something that was like, I always felt like I was watching something that knew what it was, while
Mm,
simultaneously like not just throwing it all in the bin and going, let's just be completely like silly and stop trying. Which I actually like really respect. Um, because and that's one thing that came along. It was why I was able to find it charming, because
mm.
if it was just made to be silly, then I think I would find it really like irritating
Oh,
and cloying. But because I know the conditions it was made under, because it was made under like yeah, like you say, like I've I have I know this is like not a bit biased, but I have had to use like people, I've had to make student films and like got people who are not good, and like just like put them there and like do it. Not the last film I made, because no, the actors in that are not going to listen to this. But if you were, because they're friends of mine from that last film, you were
you know that
genuinely
every film
good.
you make is a student film with like barely paid actors, right? You're not insulting anyone here. This is just what being a student is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I I really like commend doing this, and I it's more than just like um outside of the art. Like it's not just an external thing. Like that viewpoint comes into my enjoyment of the film, because all of those moments where it was riding the line of irony, like I was just quite like, yeah, I was just quite respectful that, like, despite obviously knowing that this wasn't the ideal circumstances, he did it
Mm.
anyway. Like he had enough respect for his own film to do it. So yeah, that's why I was able to find it charming.
What I'm struggling is there's a real disconnect between admiring how ambitious making a film on effectively like $7,000
Yeah.
um is. Like I want the film about making mariachi because that is fascinating.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't entirely cross that wire with a lived experience of enjoying the film. It was like this is cute, this is charming, but I wasn't, it never kind of got me. Like I was thinking a lot about Assault on Precinct 13, which I think this speaks to like which is Carpenter's debut, right? And in terms of like straggling that line between, hey, everything in the script is like corny, the acting is going to be like really wide.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
that film does it, in my opinion, so like deftly and confidently and entertainingly that it basically becomes like a proto 80s action film. Like this is just the the writing all the performances. Like the villain, for example, feels
I
like,
love the wait.
oh
Okay,
man, I don't
Moko.
know.
No, I don't like
I'm so
Moko.
torn
No, Moko kind of
because
sucked. I'm
so
not gonna
Loco
lie.
is like, Mum, can we get James Spader? It's like, no, we have James Spader at home. And it's like, it's really funny on a production standpoint that it's just this like budget shit version of James Spader. But then also, I don't know if that correlates with me being like into it or like this is good and I'm enjoying this. It's kind of just like
Yeah,
it's funny that this is made, or I don't know, like the production aspect of it is entertaining.
yeah. So I think this does. I mean, well, what's really interesting is I didn't like Assault on Precinct 13 very much, and you were really into it, and we've had just like completely the inverse of each other again. And I found that almost I found the humility of this film is what made it charming for me. The fact that Assault on Precinct 13 was so competently made, and yet, like, it's not a very, like, I didn't find it, like, hugely, like, enthralling. Like, it's not, it has a really competent budget. Like, I'd say these two films are of very similar scales. Uh, in terms of narrative and action and what they're going for. But because this film is of a smaller scale, uh, and yet it's so clearly like more cheaply made, I felt like I could just engage with it more. Like I felt like I could make allowances for it more. Like when I wasn't that in that engaged with any of the characters in Assault on Precinct 13, the dissonance between how actually like it doesn't look cheap, that film. Like that film looks good, and when I didn't care about any of the characters that much, I was kind of like, like maybe I should do. And with a film like this, my kind of brain was operating at a different level. Like it was more refreshed by the fact that it wasn't a complete piece of shit, and that it was made earnestly, like a lot of films made at this level that I've watched by myself that are just complete shams of films. So yeah, I think that was I think why I enjoyed this more than Assault on Precinct 13, which as soon as I put this on, I knew comparisons to that were going to end up in this episode.
Hmm. Okay, I feel like this lacks a kind of authorial uh intent that I feel like Assault had. Like when we talked about Assault, even though
Mm.
you didn't enjoy it, I think we had very interesting conversations about how that film was in conversation with the cinema that inspired it,
Yeah.
and how it's reacting to 70s cinema, and how it's like trying to sidestep thematic questions like, hey, no, we're just not talking about race in this film. Like the
Yeah.
interesting stuff it does to like create this gang utopia. uh like there is a confidence and like a feeling of that film being extremely well thought out,
Yeah.
whereas this one doesn't have that quality. So like I could look at Assault and see like character arcs, and because I like care about those characters, I like seeing the criminal with a heart of gold fall in love with the police officer. It's really fun when at the end he's like, you're a pretty groovy guy, and he's like, you're not too bad yourself. I'm like, wow, we made it, arc complete. Whereas here
Oh, that's here. That is
there
here.
is the main character's arc, which
And
is
he's the titular guy. Like that's an
but
ensemble
there
film, and this is about him. This
I
is
get
about
that,
him.
but let me finish.
No, sorry,
It
sorry.
does feel modeled, right? Because you start off with kind of thematically, the main character, kind of his role in the world is this idea that he's a man out of time. Much like in Assault on Precinct 13, where he comes in expecting to be this Wild West cop hero. He comes into a world of boring kind of uh busy work and bureaucracy. The main character of Assault is a man out of time, and the same with the main character here is a man out of time. He wants to be this El Mariachi band. He goes up to this bar, and they got like this guy playing like a keyboard that can like play demos of all the
That
instruments. And there's
wasn't
this
that
it's
fucking
a funny scene. It's
adorable.
a funny scene. And there's a line, technology has replaced, the tradition. I wanted to be like my ancestors, and I can't. So there's this idea that, man out of time, kind of the world moving on from him. Uh and I don't know how meaningfully the end of his arc, which is obviously like, he starts off as a bright-eyed, happy
Yeah.
person, and then ends, he loses everything and becomes this badass El Mariachi. It's this standard kind of hero origin story. Um, I don't know how that is in conversation with this idea of like him being a man out of time, of like technology kind of ruining the El Mariachi tradition. um that like thematically
Yeah.
this film feels confused or muddled
I
in that way.
I don't think it was so much I know technology is like specifically a word that's said, but I think it's also like people. like he arrives in the town and he's like, oh, this seems like a friendly place, and it seems like I'm gonna get along well with the people here. And then like he just has a terrible time consistently, like no. And it I think it's more about feeling like the world has changed around him, not just technology, but just like kind of small town values going away, and now and like kind of in favor of the big city thing, which is like, I'm not saying it's deep, but it's there.
Yeah, yeah, I do see what you mean. Like the arc was, this is a nice town where they give me coconut for free, and then the end of it, oh, this is a bad town with gangsters in it. I can't trust anyone, not even myself. I I can see like the pulpy enjoyment of that arc.
So
I never got yeah, I can see how I can see how you can tie those together. I understand.
yeah, I'm not saying it's great, but so yeah, I'm purely looking at the through line between you enjoying Assault on Precinct and not enjoying this as much, because I know this is a lot more rough around the edges. Um, I really do think the action works though, and I think there is a really solid like style here that is really charming. Like when you see, like it's almost it's kind of like Edgar Wright, almost like the stuff with like the sped up phone calls and shit like that. Like that's very Edgar Wright, and I find that stuff really charming. And again, the fact that he put that stuff in here on a low budget, I really respect. Like knowing that it wouldn't pay off in exactly the way he would actually want it to, he still respected his own vision. And yeah, I think like that first chase scene is really like it's genuinely really fun. When he like gets when he grabs the flail and swings onto the front of the bus, it doesn't look bad. Like it genuinely looks like good. I think it's well executed. It's not just like goofy action scene. I was with it. I was with the film in its action. And then a lot of the other times I found it like really cute and like earnest and fun. I really enjoyed this, and yeah, I would say I found it more charming than Assault on Precinct 13 because of its like humility. I guess it's like it feels a lot more like appropriately made.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess what I'm struggling with it is it feels like any praise I can give to this film feels like it's buffeted by it. Oh, it's amazing they did this on so little money. There's always like there's a caviar. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
in this that I truly love or like kind of on its own um merits. Like it just kind of feels like I'm grading a student paper. Like, oh, it's really great. This person was able to do this with so little money. Like I think being able to not praise this film without the caveat of like, isn't it impressive? The budget is so low,
Mm.
holds me back from being truly impressed with it. Like, I don't. Did
No,
you like the characters or I
I
just like?
didn't no, I didn't like love
I don't think they're
the
that
characters.
funny. I wish I like the main character. The girlfriend is beautiful and but she's kind of like a nothing character. She's kind of just kind of like a plot thing. Um,
I think the standouts are I think El Mariachi and Azul, and I think everyone else apart from Domino, who is the girlfriend, I think she's genuinely kind of boring and like doesn't have enough of that. I think the film takes her too seriously, but I guess it kind of has to. Um, uh, Everyone around Azul and El Mariachi is kind of a meme, and that's really fun. But then and Azul, like I actually like genuinely kind of I get him. Like he does
mm,
feel like a person to me. Uh in the same way that like the the like criminal guy from Assault on Precinct 13, I like you get him as well. Uh I think I
Oh,
can
but
admit I can well, hang on, I can admit that the reason I like this film so much is because I have seen like films made in this at this level of production that do a lot less with what they have. And so it's really refreshing to see a film that actually does commit to itself. Like this is, I would say, the first micro budget film that isn't like a drama or like a, kind of like a drama comedy that actually tries. Like whenever you see a micro budget horror or action film, they're always fucking worthless because they don't respect what they're trying to do enough to see it through. Like you can, I think this film proves that you can do it. And now having seen all those films where they don't, it's really entertaining and like quite, I don't want to say inspiring, but like yeah, just refreshing to see something that does do that. So, but I also can admit that's probably why I got so much out of this. And if you haven't seen a lot of that stuff, it's a lot less refreshing, and it's a yeah, but like you said with funny haha, like it's a lot easier to like do something with that, especially like the ilk of directors that make films on those micro budgets are normally a lot more like passionate and driven as well.
yeah, I mean, obviously, this isn't going for like the emotional. I find Funny How Hard to be like a very emotional film because it really captures like the ennui of early 20s. Obviously, this is going for action and maybe like mild comedic thrills rather than like any sort of emotional resonance. I don't think you're meant to feel like super torn up at the end of when Domino dies. It's kind of just like a pulpy,
It's knowing pastiche. It's knowing
yeah.
pastiche.
But I don't. I agree. I like the demeanor of the kind of the man arc Athel
Yeah.
that El Mariachi's been confused with. I don't. Again, he doesn't have. And I kind of like. He doesn't really have like a character though, in the way that
Yeah.
I really enjoyed in Assault. Why did they call you Napoleon? I'll only tell people when they'll be the last. If I'm about to die, I'll tell someone, and that's like a running motif for that film. And
The
like,
Napoleon is particularly awesome.
gotta light,
Yeah.
gotta smoke. Like this little ticks like that made him feel like, even in just like a comic book silly way, a dude. And I don't. And these people, I almost wish they were more broad. I wish they had even more like stupid motifs
Mm,
or catchphrases or stuff. I guess we kind of have it with, even when it tries, it kind of, I don't, it doesn't like completely fulfill me. Like with the villain having the thing where he lights his cigarettes by like flicking his match on wherever like facial hair is nearby to show that how little he cares for his goons.
yeah.
And then when he dies, the goon flicks his match on his dead
Mhm.
body, and it's like,
It
I don't know, like nothing.
that
I
that
can't unironically say I like anything. Like, yeah,
that's very on a mechanical level. It's also like a setup for why they would betray him at the end, which is something. Do you know what I mean? Like it. I
yeah.
think the film, like it's tight. Like it works. You know what I mean? I it was never like, why is this happening? I don't feel like it ever takes the piss. With like plot conveniences and things like that. It's a tight script. But yeah, I think we can do our recommendations. If you if that's cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this a week not recommend on the basis that like what are the positive things I have to say about it kind of come with the caviar of like it's kind of condescending, it's so impressive they did this for so little money. And I can't sincerely like laud it for that. Like it's you know I'm looking forward to the next two films and seeing how he grows as a director, how he gets to a place where he can direct something like From Dusk Till Dawn, or
Yeah.
even the Spy Kids too. I'm joking, but like get to a place of directing films that I think are generally of really really good, fun, pulpy, dumb characters in action. Like how did we get to like him directing George Clooney in Dusk Till Dawn as just this wonderful, absurd character. So I'm looking forward to seeing that growth of him as a director. But I can't generally say that I enjoyed it. It
Yeah.
felt like an interesting experiment, and it was it was a curious exploration of what you can do with a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at.
I'm gonna give this a decent recommend. I think all of the like meta stuff for this film that we've talked about, I found very like viscerally impacted my enjoyment of it. Not just because of like the caveat thing that Josh talked about, but because it does actually like do it, I think. And whenever it's just being itself. It's a film that profoundly feels honest, and I never felt like I was getting something other than Rodriguez's vision, which I think on a budget this low is genuinely impressive. And I don't think that's so much a caveat, because for me it that, like I said, plays into my actual enjoyment of the film. Like if I'm able to see someone succeeding on a budget this low, which is difficult, like it's like filmmakers kind of talk about this kind of like, you know, oh, if if you can make a film, you can make a film kind of thing, which I think is bullshit, because it's very difficult to get vision across when you don't have money, because like, when everyone's stressed and you've got like 2 hours to do something, and and then you're there like, no, I need to do this thing like again, or like I need to do this in this really annoying way, and like no one wants to. That's really hard. And so yeah, I think it's not so much condescending as it is like respectful almost. So I just really enjoyed it as just a refreshing piece of low budget filmmaking in a genre where normally low budget filmmaking is actually abhorrent. Like some of the worst films I've ever seen are like low budget action and horror stuff. Not to say that there aren't a lot of great films in that field, but some of them are truly unforgivable. So I give this a
Mm,
decent recommend. Uh,
that's fair. But even budget aside, like this isn't an
yeah,
inspiring script for me. Like if I read this now, how much money was going to be put to it? It needs work. It needs work from a writing standpoint, I think.
sort of Precinct 13 isn't like grand. Like it's not. I don't see the
There are lines
divide.
that I remember. There are character traits I remember, character beats, arcs, themes. I would not take this carpenter slander. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, we're doing Desperado, right, in a couple weeks' time.
Yeah, Desperado will be out on
Maybe
the
2 or 4
12th of
weeks. Who
October.
knows?
Yeah.
Cool. Next week we're finishing off the Joanna Newsom Have One on Me retrospective, in which we talk about disc 3 of Have One on Me. So it'll be exciting to round that
Hell
discussion out.
yeah. It's gonna be real cute. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Subscribe to all our socials, whatever, follow them, check them out, whatever. Uh, Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.